AKA 3 out of 10 anime.
Yep.
This show is all about having fun conversations to rank anime based on a standard set of criteria so they can be compared, contrasted, organized, and recommended. We discuss a different show or movie each week, so whether you're a seasoned weeb or new to the genre, we know you'll have a good time. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Here's the agenda for each episode. We start by giving our first impression of the show in one sentence. Then we go into our personal enjoyment, which is a scale of 1 to 10 based on our own personal rubrics. And then we go into technical. Technical is a combined score, 1 to 10, based on four set of criteria scored 1 to 5. Then at the very end, we give our comparisons and recommendations to other shows and announce what episode we're doing next week. I'm Brett.
I'm Skylar.
And I'm Braydn.
We are your show hosts from the United States. We each have varying opinions, tastes, and backgrounds, which should result in some interesting and relatable dialogue, no matter who you are. We're grateful that you're joining us for our adventure this week about a place further than the universe. If you couldn't already tell by what we are wearing today, for those who are listening, go check out our YouTube channel, 3 out of 10 anime. This show is glorious. We're going to talk about the entire thing, which is only one season. So spoiler warning, expect spoilers. If you don't want them, go watch the show and come back. And we do think you should watch the show. But without further ado, while I get into my inside clothes, how would you guys give your first impression of a place further than the universe in one sentence?
Yes. So I'll start. This is Braydn speaking here. I pleasantly was able to find a Great Gatsby style-esque point of view of a bunch of teenagers having a midlife crisis. And I really liked it. I really, really did. It was a good spot for me to go and just soak in just a good story about friendships. Skylar?
So yeah, my one sentence is a surprisingly good adventure following some teenage girls on their journey to Antarctica. Emphasis on the surprising side of that.
Surprising. Very surprising.
Okay. Thanks for holding down the fort, Braydn. You can de-garb.
Oh, see, this is what you guys don't know. It is freezing cold in this basement I recorded.
Oh, it is?
So I have a blanket on me at all times. I'm ready to go. This is my gear. We're here tonight.
It is very hot in my office, so I will not be wearing that on the regular. Okay, for me, my one sentence, an absolutely extraordinary, wholesome, compelling, emotional show that hit me way deep down in ways I did not expect, and a rare 10 out of 10.
Wow.
I'm revealing my score in my intro sentence because I think it's that important. And so I'm just going to quickly say what a 10 out of 10 show is for me. For me, a 10 out of 10 show is either one that I enjoyed as much or more than any other anime I have seen. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It's just that I loved watching it so much. Either I was so enthralled by the story, or in the case of A Place Further Than the Universe, I could not find anything to dislike. I literally, even if I tried, could not find something to dislike. And so that's what a 10 is for me, and this show hits that. Sky, what'd you give it for enjoyment?
So for enjoyment, I actually gave A Place Further Than the Universe a 9.5. So still very, very high rating. And so I'll give you both my 10 and my 9 rating because it's right between those. So for me, a 10 is a show that I thoroughly enjoyed and I would not hesitate to recommend. I have no problems watching it again alone, and I either have or will. And then a 9 is a show that I really enjoyed. I will still readily recommend it. and I will watch it again with others. And then there's a might on the watching it again alone.
Okay.
All
Braydn.
right. Yeah, and coming in the caboose, I rounding in as a 9 as well. That's the highest score I give a show that is as phenomenal as can be, but is so in the entertainment sphere. A 10 for me is something that's reached beyond entertainment and has actually made a significant impact in my life. Yet I really can't say anything really terribly negative about the show. It's absolutely a joy to watch time and time again.
Sweet. All right. Well, let's just dive right into the things that we enjoyed that made it such a highly rated show. I think in our podcast history, this is episode 11, excluding bonus episodes. I think this is our highest rated enjoyment show, shy of Sword Art Online, the first 14 episodes. Right?
Really? For our group, like everybody watching together.
No. For us three. For us three on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what?
It's rare that happens. I remember. So I'm gonna take a small sidebar because the first show I came into with the anime club you guys invited me to was Astra Lost in Space. Mm-hmm. And you guys were like tossing the 9s and the 8s and the 9.5s, and I'm like, I just couldn't hit that. And so when I come in with the 2 and just say that we've disagreed on many anime, that's typical. We have very wildly different opinions across this. That we try to coerce the technical part of the thing, but when a gem like this comes up, we have to talk about it. So what do you guys want to talk about?
So okay, speaking of gem, this is probably going to be just a gush fest for a little while. I'm gonna mention a couple things that really stood out to me that I enjoyed about the show.
Yeah.
And I'll just do a couple rapid fire ones. Maybe let's do the inverse this time. Couple rapid fire ones, and then we'll start to dig in.
Okay.
I think it was beautiful and super detailed. Like, all of the little teeny tiny parts of the animation and the art was so good. Like the labels on all of the dials and the knobs and the flags hanging
and
down
the warning
inside
signs
the ship.
in the hallway and
the
all that
warning
good
signs
stuff.
in the hallway, all that good stuff. So good. So the art was phenomenal. The music was great. The music was so good for this show. The characters were super endearing, and the struggles they went through on a personal level and a relationship level with each other was so compelling, especially the main character with her mom and the ending of the show. I've seen the show 3 times, and I cried all 3 times. And I was like, I know what's coming. But then I'm watching it, and it's just so beautiful, and I cried every time. I watched it with my wife and for Anime Club, and then I watched it with my family, my parents and my siblings. They were watching it, and we watched the last few episodes together, and then I watched it again another time. So those are just some of the things that were just so good for me.
You said something I want to touch on there for a minute. Because I don't know did you hear my one sentence, Brett, or you took your headphones off and doing all your stuff? Did you catch that?
No, I did not.
So for you that were listening and paying attention, I brought up the fact that this is a Great Gatsby style-esque point of view style storytelling. Because you said the main character is Shirase, but she's not. The main character and narrator of the show is Mari Tamaki, the little friend.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
However, she's not like the main driving interest. She's not like the main protagonist. She's just the point of view narrator that we get attached to as we watch the story unfold. Shirase, the main character has the tender bit with her mom, goodness gracious. Watching that as a side along was a really interesting note. Like it's really cool to see I guess like to be an accompaniment on this adventure, because I don't know what it is with a bunch of teenage girls having a midlife crisis that like I needed in my life. Like I get that, great. They like, oh man, life is so like short. I have to go live. I'm gonna go to Antarctica. I'm like, yeah, let's go, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's I think the big thing that made this show a 10 out of 10 for me is the emotions that I had watching it. There were so many moments where I was literally out loud like, yes, like when Shirase stepped foot in Antarctica, when she stood on the ice, and she was like fists up in the air, and she was like, "Screw you, I made it!" And then everyone on the boat started chanting.
I was like, yes!
I was like, yeah, I started chanting too. I was like, "You made it, screw you!" And then when she started yelling at at the bullies, when Hinata started yelling at Shirase was defending Hinata on the TV, broadcast. I was emotional for that moment. I was emotional when Megumi had her kind of falling out with Mari and her jealousy.
Gets me. That one is crazy to toss into this show because there are so many layers of stuff that is just happening across this thing. We talked a couple weeks ago, I can't remember what episode, about it was Rascal Doesn't Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai, of the weaving, the interlocking of the story parts that come together. In some instances, there is a story arc that we're following in a very more true manner than a lot of other anime like Rascal. Yet there is a weave of who's taking the story beats and this story is going over here, this story is going over here, and they work together. I just watched one where there was a guy on the ship that had a crush on the captain, on Jin Todo. Wait a second. I just realized her last name is Todo, which is the same name as my favorite character from Jujutsu Kaisen. Are they related? Anyway, so this guy has a crush on the captain, and absolutely on no conditions can he go follow through with it. But this little start, this little send off into the episode starts talking about personal relationships and how the captain knew Shirase before the whole incident with her mother happened. And so they had a connection. They just had not talked at all on the ship because they both felt awkward about both having that shared loss of Shirase's mother and also Jin's friend.
And the storytelling was so relatable. The pacing was unbelievably realistic in this show because really, when you make friends with someone, you don't just tell them your whole life story right out of the gate. You dig and you dig, and it wasn't until the end of the show where Hinata showed why she was there, and then Yuzuki had her little birthday, and the little birthday thing was so oh man, just all throughout the pacing was just so spot on.
Okay, because that episode with the birthday. Sorry, Skylar. I've talked way too much. Please jump in.
Well, yeah. So that's actually something that I wanted to touch on, which is what I think really made it stand out to me, is that it was so down to earth and it was so grounded that even though some of the situations might not have happened that way, it was plausible enough that it totally could have. And so, and like you said, it was just the pacing and all the things that kind of happened along the way. The whole passport episode.
With the durians? Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and the durians, where it's the way that whole thing worked out, and just the stress and just the desperation that you kind of have in some of those situations. Again, to me, it was just so down to earth, and it was done in such a good way in pretty much every aspect that I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
So keep going, Skylar. You said in your one sentence that you were surprised thoroughly. You mentioned a couple things. What else surprised you about how much you liked it?
So the surprising concept is, okay, let me explain the premise to you. It is a group of high school girls trying to get to Antarctica. Okay, that sounds really boring.
In real world Japan, in real actual reality.
Yeah, and not in some fantasy whatever.
Gundam. Nothing like that.
It's not an isekai.
It is a reality drama about them trying to get to Antarctica. And so just off that premise, you're just kind of okay, whatever. But then as you start watching, you somehow get sucked in between the relationships between these characters, their journey, and even just when they get to Antarctica, a lot of the small, subtle details that they get right is honestly impressive.
Definitely. a lot of, and I'm glad you said that, because the attention to detail, I mentioned it already, but the attention to detail I'll call again so Skylar and I are pretty avid into science and biology and that kind of thing. And to see all of the things they were talking about Antarctica, like you can tell a boatload of research went into making this anime. And
a boatload, yes.
And they freaking...
One whole boat.
They freaking nailed it. Like, oh man, it was so on point. I can't even give enough examples. If I'm trying to be specific, like the taste of the water and the water content, the way they were drilling down to get through the layers of ice, the method that they used for packing, the strapping things down in the ship. Go.
They had a morning drill where they're like, all right, you're healthy, your feet are good, you have ate today. And there was like a whole like routine they did that had nothing to do with the girls. At another point, when they first jump into Antarctica in the base, there's apparently a high static discharge because of how dry it is down there.
Yes.
Like, what the heck is that detail? And how is it so seamlessly like put as part of the show? It happens all the time. Like, you guys will find it all the time. Is like there was an immaculate level of discussion and detail about what it takes to get to Antarctica and what it's like down there, which has really sucked me in. It's really good.
And even just the day-to-day, because I like slice of life anime. I do. And so that they nailed those day-to-day aspects but kept it entertaining to the level that they did. That's again where I said that it was surprisingly good.
Yes.
And I'll chime in there because I hate slice of life anime. I can't stand it. I get bored out of my mind. This did not feel like a slice of life at all, even though it could technically be classified as one, but I didn't feel bored once. I was engaged start to end, every episode, all along the way. And I'm going to add one other thing in that I liked about this. They kept it short. It's 13 episodes. It is a short show, but they pack so much emotion into that short 13 episodes. It makes me depressed to think of other shows that are 24 episodes long and you feel like you want to skip episodes. They didn't make it
600 episodes
or Naruto. They didn't make it longer than it needed to be, and they didn't leave some kind of cliffhanger of maybe a second season. They ended it with a beautiful resolution that you are happy and satisfied after 13 episodes. That chef's kiss.
I want to toss another surprise I had with this one, especially from the last two anime we talked about, which were Steins Gate and Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. The all-star female cast they had on this one did not bother me. Because notably, it was, the other two were harem-y, right? It's like the all-female cast, except for the one main guy, and they all kind of like clustered around him, and he had to solve all of the girls' problems, right? I think that's really the big difference between them, because I was trying to think about it, and like, I don't have a problem with an all-female cast. Obviously, this show throws out just a stellar way of me being able to attach to characters that are living life as understandably and as expected. Everything in here feels realistic. Everything in here feels something that I can relate to. And it had nothing to do at all with how the characters are portrayed. Unlike Steins and Rascal, where I did knock both of them for having a guy solve all the girls' problems. The girls had all the problems, and the guy was the guy that ended up fixing them.
And the problem solving in this show on that point was so good, because they tried to solve problems in multiple ways and failed a lot, and needed to come up with new ways of solving a problem, and that was really cool. To Skylar's point, this show was just so dang relatable and realistic that it was really exceptional. It was just a joy to watch. You just felt like you were in that world, and even in certain moments you're like, yep, I've done that. Like when, like Skylar, you mentioned the passport episode, I've been traveling and lost my driver's license or my wallet, and yep, I totally get like all the things Hinata went through, and like the don't want to hold your friends back, let them go. But yeah, like, man,
and then
this was
the discussions,
relatable.
Like that birthday episode with Yuzuki, where she's like, all right, I didn't realize that we were friends because she's a child star, has a hard time in her life making those friends. I need you to sign this contract. I need you to sign this contract so that I know that if after this trip is over, that we're still friends. And I'm like, oh my gosh! And not only was I was like, oh my gosh, that hurts. Mari, the main character, is like, oh my goodness, that's so sad. Are you serious? You don't? Oh no! And the connection they made through with it's not just the details. It is not just the storytelling. It's not just the relatable life events. They are making emotional connections that I needed to have made in some kind of form. It's great to see that these things are relatable and apply to a 13 episode anime about Antarctica. It's crazy.
Yes. Absolutely. What other things do you guys have? I have one moment that stood out that was funny. First of all, Mari had a mom and a dad. She had parents. They weren't dead. They weren't dead. Huzzah! Huzzah!
They did it!
To be fair, the parents missing is typically more of a trope for fantasy action stories.
Okay, sure, but still, it's like the thing. And if they don't have parents, they have one grandparent. But she had parents, and the parents were present in multiple episodes of the show, particularly the one where I related to, where she was scheming of this whole thing to get to Antarctica, not telling her mom quite yet because she wanted to wait till it was the right moment. And then she comes in and her mom's cutting the carrots. And you know that the mom knows that she knows, and Mari knows the mom knows. And you're just like, and I'm just like, oh man, I've been in that situation so many times, and it feels just like that.
That chop of the carrot got me every time they show the animation. They go like, the dunk, the dunk. And I'm like, oh, she's screwed. She's screwed.
It's maybe 3 minutes. But it adds so much. And that's the thing. I don't think the show wasted any time on superfluous things. They really wove in at every moment things that mattered to the story, and they stayed focused. They didn't try to introduce tons of side characters. They had side characters throughout, but they came in, they fulfilled their role, and then they went back to the background, and we got back to focusing on Shirase, Mari, Hinata, and Yuzuki. So good. And even Jin. Jin's relationship with Shirase was really powerful, especially at the end. Yeah. I have a lot of stuff to talk about that's actually in the technical section, because honestly, I just rewatched this today and yesterday. I rewatched the whole thing.
Wow.
And I go watch it. You know what I mean? So I think I've covered most of the stuff I have. I have one last detail, but a lot of good stuff I have to talk about in the technical that I really want to dive into. So this is even going to lean towards that a little bit. So Shirase, the motivator protagonist, as I've dubbed her, she has a really interesting quirk that was done so well, and I don't mean so well because her voice actor made it amazing. Is that Shirase has stage fright in a real bad way. She sounds like a maniac when she's on camera, and she's stuttering. And she's nervous, and she sounds completely different than she does in normal life. It's one thing to work your normal voice and to be a little stuttery about it. And it's another thing to realize that you're a completely different character on screen, and what that character is like when they're so nervous. Every time it happened, every single time it happened, episodes 5 onward, when they do the daily recordings, telling the world about these 4 girls that went to Antarctica. Every time it happened, I'm like, oh my goodness. The voice actors though, it just sucked me into exactly what they were doing at that moment.
I totally agree. And in fact, one of the things I really enjoyed about the voice actors in this show is they were also relatable. All the 13-year-old girls did not have unreasonably high-pitched voices. They sounded so natural and very dynamic and fitting to the situation, and they did their little even their emotional inflection, watching the whole thing in Japanese multiple times, even the inflection of their voice when a stressful thing is happening.
Yes.
It really felt like it was kind of a next level voice acting experience. I think in every way this show just put on a clinic Truly.
There's a moment where Jin and Shirase, I think it's like in a like it's like a flashback is what I'm trying to say, where they both say Pengu, and they say it in the exact same tonation, but it's definitely the adult voice and the kid voice together. I'm like, oh yes. Yes, you can blend this stuff. You can put them over each other. You can like share emotions. Yeah. Anime, please. Yes. What is happening? This is so good. Anyway, sorry, Scudder.
What else do you got, Sky?
A lot of it I'll probably address in the technical section, but yeah, just everything was just executed so incredibly well.
Well, then do we just jump into technical? Keep this enjoyment section nice and short
honestly,
because it's amazing?
I have so much more to gush on, and it's going to just bleed out in the technical section, so I don't see why not.
Okay, well, let's do it then.
Yeah.
I think this is actually, I'm going to pause for 2 seconds and say that I think this is a big testament to the show, that it was a 9 or a 10 show, that we could just talk about how good it is for a long time, but the fact that we're excited to just jump into the technical aspect and talk about how good it was technically, I think that's another really, really strong point for this show. So
yeah,
I just think that's really
good
cool.
Call. I mean, we like doing the technical section because we like being able to come together in consensus about the things they do well, even if we disagree in our personal evaluations.
Yeah. And at
but
this point,
to be excited about this content, about this part of the content, I mean, we were like kind of memey excited about the Steins Gate delivery part last time, but this time there's a lot of gush on crew. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's jump in. So technical, just a reminder real quick. So you can find all of our rubrics, both enjoyment and technical, on our website, 310anime.com, 310anime.com. You can also listen to the podcast there and see an about page that talks about us and how this whole thing got started. So check it out. Moving into technical, here's how it works. We have 4 categories: art, story, characters, delivery. We rank each of those on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being terrible, 5 being exceptional. 3 for all categories is meh, on par with what you would expect from a decent show. It doesn't stand out for being exceptionally good or bad. And we always start with art. Art includes music, animation, sound design, art style, intro and outro song. I'm going to start by saying, man, this show in all of those categories felt pretty darn exceptional to me.
It really did, because even on the CG side of things, which is where a lot will stumble, they handled the CG elements rather well.
Only when they had to use CG, and it was things that were... that, like you said, when you see a CG helicopter and it's kind of like moving along the screen and not the same frame rate as the normal animation, it looks janky. They did really good there too.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think about, because I did have a couple notes here in art. Like the landscaping, immaculate. The animation, it had it when they wanted to like really like show off some moments. I remember one where the crew, there was like 4 male guys of the crew were helping like lower a bridge or drop an anchor or something. I can't remember what, but off the edge of the boat. That moment was like a whole 10 seconds of just great animation work. They didn't need that at all times. They did a lot of talking stuff. They didn't have as much like animation detail thrown into it, but they did work out some really, really cool moments. However, go ahead.
But even
we're on animation. Go ahead.
Yeah, but even there in the talking sections, they were very emotive when they spoke. And so there was still a lot going on with the animation, even when they were just talking.
I won't say art-wise that this is the most like standout anime I've seen. It's just like the best of normal grade anime is what I'd say. Because like if I'm thinking like the best, like Studio Ghibli, Your Name level of stuff, like that those art styles are just breathtaking. These are understandable. And they allow me to see the beauty of Antarctica. Like there's not quite. I don't know if I can take it down from exceptional for this, but it's phenomenal. It's really strong. It's a very strong base, and I want to say that honestly is where I sit for across the board. Because even in music, was something that you said you really liked. I noticed that they wove in their themes out in really well. They did, however, have 4 or 5 themes, a couple of which I felt were a bit hokey of music, that while they were used appropriately, did notably like take me out of the experience time and again. I think especially of like the, oh, we're being a little silly. This is like a silly situation one, like dink da dunk da dink da dunk kind of a stuff. I remember like notably that I put here on my notes, that one taking me out of it in the first episode, and it comes up again later episodes. So
yeah, I can see what you're saying there, and I think there were a couple repetitive moments as well. But when I compare the quality of the score of the show holistically to the quality of the score of other shows, not of other shows, let's just compare it against itself. The rubric 5 exceptional is that the composition always delivers powerful moments in an excellent fashion. And I think that when it came down to, okay, we have a story to tell, a moment to deliver, an emotion to convey with music and animation, whenever they needed to do that, they did it. Like, I think that always, if not all, almost always, if not always, they hit those moments. That's what I'm thinking. Skylar, what were you going to say?
Well, one thing that Braydn kind of mentioned where he was comparing them to Studio Ghibli, Your Name, is that those are all movies. And for me personally, movies I hold to a higher criteria because they have a higher budget and are working on less time.
Okay.
And so I expect movies to have a higher quality of just art and animation. And so for a place further than your universe, having such outstanding art and having such outstanding animation in a show, well, then I'll toss a different one to you then. That's not a movie. We haven't talked about it yet on this podcast, but Demon Slayer. Because if we're talking about literally the greatest art style and animation I have seen in any anime, it is Demon Slayer. Like, we're talking absolute pinnacle. They go beyond having, like, working off the anime genre and having their own style that they just flourish in that anime. And that's kind of what I'm saying.
This hits a bar below that, notably.
I agree, but I'm not comparing it to Demon Slayer. I'm comparing it to the rubric.
Yes. And so what I'm saying is, because I see this anime and I see that it reaches and does notable things with the strong stuff that it has, I'm putting it just below that. I don't see it as a 4 by any means, but more of a 4.5 across the board.
So what are you thinking, Sky? So Braydon's throwing out a 4.5. I think I'm vying for a 5. I see where you're coming from, Braydon, but I don't think for me it really brings down. I don't think it brings it down from a 5 for me. I think that it delivers powerful moments so well, so much of the time, that I don't think it really missed that often, if at all.
I will say a lot of those powerful moments were accented by the characters, the writing, the edit actually is incredible in this one, down in delivery.
True.
And the voice acting, not specifically the art.
So, what do you mean by that then? What is it about the art that they failed to execute on that brings it down?
Because the moments of when I was looking at the screen, I was like, wow, that is beautiful. It happened in some regularity, but it wasn't just a sweeping thing that I always noted about it. In fact, there were some moments I was like, okay, that's more normal animation. I'll give it that because it does these other things very well. But there's like a couple highlight times, once or twice, maybe 3 times an episode, where I'm like, wow, that's gorgeous. The same with music.
So let me ask you this. So so it says, 4, the composition always delivers powerful moments in an excellent fashion. 4 is often, 5 is always.
Yeah.
Like, what are examples of when you think it did not deliver powerful moments in an excellent fashion?
If we're referring back to the moment I talked about where they did the cool animation engaging with the 4 guys on the boat, I can't remember exactly the scene, then going to a talking scene. It just how am I trying to say this? I wish I had better verbiage, a better vocabulary for this section of animation. But if it goes from like a really engaging scene to a lot of normal looking anime stuff, like where it's still strong and they do a lot of like well shaded of characters and good color. It feels to me more like a normal anime more times, and it feels excellent.
I see what you're saying. I'm starting to get on board with what you're saying. And I would totally go down to a 4.5 because I see what you're saying, and if I'm thinking about what an exceptional show is that does all of those things, and I said earlier that I'm not comparing it to other shows, but if I'm thinking about what shows do that, the one I think of, other than Demon Slayer, because I think Demon Slayer has some normal moments in it as well, I think of Violet Evergarden, which to me is the pinnacle of the artistic capabilities of an anime show. It has literally won more awards for art than any other anime in history. So I'm thinking of that one. However, I'm going to throw out one thing we talked about in the enjoyment section that to me, I think bumps it from a 4.5 up to a 5, and that is the level of detail that the animation had in it and the art had in it that I actually don't see in other shows, even things like Demon Slayer. So we talked about like the tags with the names, the warning signs, the text on the billboards was detailed, the subtitles on the news and the TVs, the text messages and the phone details, like all of those things were better and on an exceptional level compared to almost any other show I've seen. The level of detail in the animation to me is worth pushing it up to a 5 because I don't think hardly any shows do it as well as this show did.
Because that part didn't stand out to me, I can't really like push against it. I don't feel like of the background stuff and the billboards. When I see that level of stuff, especially like the Coke bottles and the advertisements, I expect that from like anime that are paying attention to detail. I didn't note anything especially here. So I will allow a 5 because I don't think this thing really falls terribly short. I'm arguing that it has a incredibly strong base that just failed to wow me in an always fashion. Yet if that strong base is enough to convince you guys for a 5, I don't see a reason to hang it back here.
What do you think, Sky?
Yeah.
So again, kind of to Brett's point that I brought up, just the amount of detail and the amount of effort that went into both the backgrounds, which admittedly are usually static, but are still highly detailed for a show, also considering how many of them were in this show. And then also just the art style of the characters and just of the entire show itself requires more work to animate. And the fact that they did that well is why I don't mind giving it a 4.5 to a 5.
So do we think a 4.5 or are we going for a 5?
Yeah.
Both of those scores I am completely fine with because that's the range that I would give it. And again, it's just because of, yes, the amount of detail that they put into it, but then the fact that they had to animate some of those things on top of that was impressive.
And I'm happy to go either way as well. I see how a 4.5 could be.
I want to toss one last thing
acceptable.
out.
Yeah.
Are we ready to give our first ever 5 in art to this show? We have never given out 5 before.
If we were going to give a 5 to a show for art that is not Demon Slayer, not Violet Evergarden.
We haven't reviewed those yet. We're coming to that.
I think, I know we haven't gotten there, but we've talked about them in the past.
Yeah.
I think if this show was standing against those, I think it could stand proudly.
Yeah.
Those.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it's half a point lower. But the one thing I will keep coming back to, and I know it didn't impress you much, Braydn, but for me, when I watched it both times, the level of detail in the show was exceptional. Like, it was truly above and beyond other shows. It really was. Like especially like in the ship, all of the like straps and the pipes and the levers and the gears and everything that like I've been in multiple naval vessels, and like that level of detail, most of the time if you watch other anime, and I'm even going to throw out Demon Slayer, when he's standing in a forest behind him, pretty bland. In the house, pretty bland. Like, there's not a lot of extra detail that goes into it, and that's not what they were going for. But where this show was going to be a super realistic show, they did it better than almost any other realistic show I've ever seen on another level. Like, that blew me away, how detailed they were. Even the people I've watched it with have said, holy cow, that's so detailed. Did you see the sign on the lever that said, push down to empty? And it was in Japanese, but then it had English brackets, and like even those little things, like really, like even when she's walking out of her house and like the garden that is in the outside of the front of her house, they didn't need to make that so detailed and realistic, but they did. And like, to me, I think that part of the show makes it so that it could stand against other shows, even if it's not exceptional in other ways. That piece is exceptional, which I think helps bring it up. But if we decide a 4.5, I'm not going to be upset either. I'm just trying to make that case that part of the show is truly above and beyond 99% of shows out there.
I have more bits we can talk about, but I don't think I'll be saying anything new here. So what are we feeling? Are you guys really wanting that pull for a 5?
What do you think, Sky?
I would want to push it up to a 5 because, kind of like I said, there are very, very, if we're going to compare it to other anime shows, there are only a couple that can contend with it. And even if we're just comparing it against itself, it still delivers extremely well.
Okay. So Skylar's firmly in the 5. I'm in the 4.5. Brett, give us a tiebreaker. You say a number, we're going to make it so.
I want a 5, but I believe it would be best if we give it a 4.5.
Okay. 4.5?
Yep.
4.5.
4.5. Okay. That section was long.
Yep, let's move on. There's so much more good stuff to talk about.
All right, to story. So, story. We've got plot devices, tone/mood, continuity, world building, pacing, rules and systems, tropes. 1, terrible, frequently nonsensical, inconsistent, boring, confusing, ambiguous, unoriginal, and disappointing. 5, exceptional, always consistent, well-paced, comprehensible, consummate, on point, and unique.
Yeah.
What are you guys thinking?
All right. I'm getting my brain out of art mode. Let's talk about the story. Because we've said this a couple times, is the pacing and the world building of this anime is phenomenal. Yes. Phenomenal. They're building our own world, but they're teaching me about Antarctica. I love that.
I wouldn't necessarily call it world building in this case, as opposed to just well researched.
What world representation?
Because it's our world.
I like that.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to build our own world. You just have to go research it.
And world representation might be a good stand-in for this. And I think they represented the world crazy good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of the things we talked about in art, like the detail, the level of detail, I think that goes into the world representation piece of this.
Absolutely. Like where they had the signs, why the signs were there, like what they were denoting on, like how the graphics. I just remember like the bathroom had like a banana being tossed into a toilet or something with a little description. And that was because that's where you go to throw up. I'm like, okay. Yeah, absolutely. I get that. I see what that picture is in Japanese. I get that.
You know, one thing that we didn't talk about in enjoyment, actually, Braydn, you started to talk on it, but I wanted to highlight it more in this section, and that's tropes. It would have been so easy for them to do the whole tropey thing where young girls are super kawaii and they get on the ship and all the young ship guys start going gaga for them. There was one little joke about like They are underage, everybody. Yes, especially you, Steven. They are underage.
Yes,
Everyone laughed. But that was it. That was all. And I was like nervous a lot of the time for them to start doing that, but they never did. And I was so glad.
Zero romance. Zero. It just was not a factor of this story.
Well, not zero, but
not
zero with the people that we didn't want it to be with.
Yes.
Sure.
Because you brought up the little fling
so
that guy had for
there
her.
was the one guy that had the crush on the captain, and that was about all that discussion with the characters is about all that went. And then there was the one side girl character who had the boyfriend back home that she was so worried was going to leave her as soon as she left.
And that was so funny and
It was so
good.
funny. That she I think if I remember the romantic points, I think that's it. I think that's all I remember.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
kudos.
Okay.
Kudos. Well done. Well, not falling into those bad tropes.
I'm gonna throw out to you guys that this story is exceptional. I do think the criteria of this show is always consistent, well paced, comprehensible, especially consummate, on point for tone and mood, and unique. I truly think this was exceptional. And if we read it, that's what I think of when I see this show. Just to clarify, for those who don't know, consummate's not a very popular word. It means showing a high degree of skill, complete, exemplary, quintessential, like it just really like high level. So I'm throwing out a 5.
Yeah,
Do you guys?
I was going through my notes to see if I had anything more to talk about, but really, we had to translate it. But the world building in here is phenomenal. The story is very, very like you get your teeth right into everything you need in 13 episodes, and the story's done. There's no season 2. That is the story, front to end.
I am a huge fan of stories that tell their story and then they're done. Fairy Tail, not that one.
Sword Art Online.
Cough, cough, cough.
Especially that one, actually.
Yeah, especially that one.
Just be freaking done. You need to be done.
Anyway, yes, a 5. Absolutely. There's nothing that's not exceptional about this storytelling in this anime.
Skylar?
Yeah, it's like I said, they say the story that they need to say, and they're done. They don't waste time on extraneous elements that don't matter. They focus on things that need to be focused on or to build up the adequate response in order to have the emotional response that you need to have for it. A great example of that, a great example to that is the whole Megami arc. Like just when it's finally revealed, it's like, oh yeah, that was me that's been trying to get in your way and I effectively betrayed you. It's just like,
So let's put a 5 down and transition into characters. Keep talking about it because this is characters.
Yes, go ahead.
So to backtrack only slightly, again, they spent the pacing in the story, they spent enough time to establish what they needed to, and then they moved on. And they revisited when necessary, and then they moved on. They didn't waste much time. And so for characters, again, for me, the big thing I look for in characters is essentially motivation. And here, everybody's motivation is apparent and checks out the entire timeline.
Once you learn it.
But
they don't spend so long dragging, telling you why, that you feel like you're being strung through, which is something we talked about with Faye Valentine and Cowboy Bebop, which is it took so long to find out her character motivation. And Hinata, and you could argue that her motivation, because it came in last in the story, took a while, but she didn't even enter the story till a few episodes in. So you were dealing with all the other characters in such a way that like you wondered about Hinata, but then by the time you got to it, you were just uncomfortable enough that you got satisfaction, but not that you were like, come on, tell me about it.
Well, especially since Hinata had some character growth, like episode 8 or 9. They were on the boat, and Hinata was having problems with Shirase, trying to like be concerned for her, like try to take care of her. No. This was the I think this was the passport episode.
Yeah.
Is like she didn't want any people to worry about her. They didn't want exceptions made about her. Nothing. And Shirase was like, no, I want to do this trip with the four of us. That's what we're doing. And the way they handled that conversation, it was true to both characters. Like they came to an argument where there was two polar sides, and they came to an agreement that I was happy with as a viewer. And I believe the characters, if given good characters, like shown really well through.
Yeah. And I didn't even do this, but I need to mention our criteria for characters is design, development, motivation, action/inaction, relationships, and personality.
Mm-hmm.
What else were you gonna say, Braydn?
So I want to transition to it. I want to say, because I think we're goosing up to the 5 that we're talking about. I have for me, I have 2 little speed bumps that try to dip this section down here.
Mm-hmm.
First, Yuzuki, the star character, was a bit out of place. It felt that time. Like she felt almost extra. She felt almost unneeded a lot. Or not a lot, or maybe it was a lot, but she almost was unnotable for a chunk of the show for me on this current rewatch. And then also I wanted to note that there is a slight issue I have with everything always like being good, or like deep emotional things always resolving well. And while I like the example and hope that this anime brought me, and that these characters were able to resolve things in a positive light, they did not carry any. I mean, maybe because they're youth. There's a lot of ways you can hand wave this, and I don't want to hold it against them. But this was not a show about any more trauma than anything they'd already done or anything that had already happened to them. They didn't bring anything new here. They just pushed forward through everything they came to, which is a bit unrealistic. Now, again, I don't care. It's a story, and they tell some really cool emotional bits that I love with these characters. Those are just little blips I'm going to throw in there.
I want to examine it a little bit, because I see what you're saying by they didn't really introduce any new trauma necessarily, but I actually think there was a lot of internal growth and new trauma that happened throughout the show. Like, for example, Megumi betraying Mari was big. Yuzuki not thinking that they were friends all along, which I think helped lends to on future watch throughs being like, oh, she's kind of in the background, and she's kind of in the background because she doesn't think she fits in. She doesn't even think that she's their friend until she realizes it. And Hinata getting super upset about what happened with her friends and needing to overcome that, and like it's not a new thing, but them finding out about each other's trauma together and overcoming it together, I actually think it introduced a lot of things that they had to overcome, failing to get accepted onto the expedition as a group the first time. Like I think there was a lot of stuff.
I will concede the Megumi and Mari friendship break being probably the largest overarching new trauma that got introduced in the show. Because that's like episode 3 or 4 or something when they're leaving for the Antarctica expedition, and it doesn't get like fully resolved until literally I think the last episode, if I remember right. However, every other like thing that gets introduced, while they do color the characters correctly, because they're very well developed characters that are acting appropriately when these things come up, they're almost always resolved in episode. Anything that new comes in, or it's like it starts and then it ends. And then they can go on to the next set of, again, very deep, very emotional, very real world problems that largely don't relate to prior things or prior traumas and accomplishments.
I guess I'm not really getting where you're coming from. Do you have some examples? Because all the examples I can think of took multiple episodes to resolve, like the overarching.
And one thing,
like sorry, if I could just for a second, Scott, then we'll get to you. I'm thinking the birthday episode where they start with the friend like not feeling like friends or whatnot, and then by the end they are friends. Like that was a start to end. The passport one, where you had the
Wait,
hard
wait,
strides
quick.
between. Go ahead.
Real quick on the birthday one.
Yeah.
It didn't start in that episode. Like 4 episodes previously, Yuzuki was showing a lot of doubt for being there and was being uncomfortable, and it led up through like 3 or 4 episodes until it came to a head in that episode. So that wasn't a 1 episode and done thing.
Okay.
I agree with Brett on that one.
Okay.
The passport one was a 1 episode thing. Wait, no, it spanned 2 episodes, didn't it?
No, because it started and ended with Durian's.
I think it was
Okay,
a
it was 1
one.
episode. So that one's 1 episode.
Yeah, I think. No, that's a good point, Brett. I think you're completely right. I think you correctly called me out on that. I just will toss. Maybe I didn't feel that these things were like they simmered and then they rose up when they needed to, instead of having like long like times to dwell on them as I might have liked. Again, though, I'm not going to shy this from a 5 score. I'm not trying to.
Sure.
I'm glad that we're discussing about this, but I'm not shying this from a 5 score for these extremely nitpicky things I brought up. These are just the only blips I have concerning this score.
So this is a hybrid character and story discussion. But the point that I will bring up to you, Braydn, is that, at least for me, the way that I view a lot of just like personal issues and relationship issues is that you're never trying to tackle 5 at once. You're usually only trying to handle the biggest one that is at the surface at that moment. And so, while the others are kind of taking a back seat because they're just not a priority yet. And so with this show, while yes, each problem essentially took 1 episode to resolve, they were introduced earlier on in the series, and then they just kind of simmered up until they needed to be resolved, and then they were handled. The other thing that I would bring up to kind of consider is just the level of stakes, because this is something that many stories kind of fall into the level of being generic. And here's what I mean by that. Oh, we have some world-ending event and only the set of heroes can come and stop it. Well, of course they're going to stop it because it's world-ending. The stakes are kind of too high. And to a certain extent, you actually uninvest from certain plots because they're too large, or conversely because they're too little. For example, it's like, oh, if we don't do this, this character's going to die. Well, I don't care about that character, so go ahead. The stake isn't that high. But with this show, and again, this is now getting back towards characters, because we cared enough about the characters, the stakes and essentially the problems, the things that came up involve the characters and either the characters themselves and some goal, some motivation that they have, or some relationship between the characters that we care about as viewers because the show has spent enough time to develop these relationships to a point that we care about these relationships. And so as these problems come up, these relationships and these motivations are essentially the stakes that we're watching being resolved. And I think that they did that really, really well.
Well
So
said,
if we look
Skylar.
at our
well said.
Yeah, really well said. If we look at our rubric here, and Braydn, I'm tracking what you're saying. I'm not just full on disagreeing with you. I see where you're coming from. I'm wondering if, and you said you weren't trying to take it down from a 5, but I'm just double checking to see if we're all on the same page. Do we think that the characters are always understandable, consistent, reasonable, adequately static, dynamic, and relatable?
Yeah, for what they're trying to say, absolutely.
Yeah, I propose yes as well.
Yep.
Okay, so that means we're at a 5 for characters.
And I want to toss in one last supposition regarding my hang up here.
Yeah.
Is that there are probably some of these emotional digs that they do with these characters that I would want to see more explored because there's stuff that I'm going through. And they are not explored to my fulfillment. Like they just they resolve it without me feeling resolved regarding the conversation. That might be what my hang up is. Though again, because they say so many deep and passionate things with these characters acting within character, I cannot dock it for accomplishing what it did, which is an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I wouldn't have thought about it that way, so I'm glad you brought that up. That's super interesting.
And to me, to add on to that, Braydn, that would be more of a story thing. that would be a pacing element.
Sure.
Yeah, I could see how that could be.
Yeah.
Well, because sometimes stories, I'll dock some stories because it's like, okay, you didn't spend enough time on that aspect for it to become relevant. Whereas some places, which is what usually happens, is you spent way too much time on that thing when you should have moved on a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
it's
pacing
interesting.
is on both sides.
There's an interesting overlap,
Kind of like
I think,
mixed,
between them.
yeah, overlap.
Because I can see both sides of it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. That was good, guys. That was a good discussion. I like that.
Yeah.
Good job.
I did too. It was really interesting. And I think that if we look at our other 5 character show, which is Haikyuu, I think this deserves to be right up there with Haikyuu. Like, no doubt. No doubt.
We have a couple 5 character animes, don't
characters are the ones where anime seems to do the best because I think we have, this is our 5th anime or 4th anime with a 5 score in character right now.
Yeah, you're right. We have Haikyuu.
Yep.
We have Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai.
Yep.
Steins Gate.
Yep.
And
now
A Place Further Than the
Universe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it totally deserves to be up there for sure.
I agree.
All right. Speaking of Steins Gate, let's go on to delivery. Delivery includes translation of the subtitles, the voice acting for the sub/dub. By the way, there is no dub
There
for the
is
show
a dub.
yet.
It
Did
is
they release it?
Russian. There's a Russian dub of the show.
English. There is no English dub of this show. Unless you learned Russian in the last week.
I definitely did not. I mean, honestly, I could watch it Russian voice actor and English subs, or English subtitles,
Well, hey, how
And
about
still
this?
grade the voice acting off of that, but we don't go there. We don't go there on this show.
If we have any viewers that speak Russian, tell us
Please.
how well they did the Russian dub.
Leave
Yes.
a comment. Please tell us.
We want to talk with you in the comments about this. Please tell us.
Okay, so for delivery, translation, voice acting, only for sub in this case, script and edit. 1, terrible. It's frequently cheesy, inappropriate, incoherent, and bland. 5, exceptional. It always is, the delivery is always believable, genuine, understandable, elevating, and enriching. Braydn, you seem like you want to touch on it.
Yes, there are a couple points here I want to touch on because so where Steins Gate had its like exceptional outreaching like English extraordinaire bonus points, this one hits solid on so many levels. And we're not talking about English voice acting either. We're talking about Japanese. They did incredible here, guys. They did so good. I don't need to speak the language to understand what these actors are saying. And it's not just the one that I brought up about Shirase having a different voice act presentation during her nervous tick while on the stage. Stage fright. Thank you, Brain. Jeez, catching up already. Yet also there were a couple moments where things like oh bugger, I had it all written down. Where did it stand out as? Dang it, I lost it someplace. Where like the PA guy had a certain voice that very very well locked in a PA. The guy that was commanding the guys to do their morning routine, that was in the perfect tone for giving a report or reporting back to a commanding officer. That and I want to say that so many small moments of this show stood out to me as to what the character need to imply. Like again, when they're dealing with the passport ladies or the plane ticket guys, like, oh, she looked at us really stern, like she dealt with us like really stern, like yeah, she did. I understood that. I heard what they were getting across. It wasn't just the one character I loved because she had so many cool moments to like show off her voice acting like diversity. It was the cast, a very strong Japanese voice acting cast in this show.
I don't have any other thoughts other than to agree. I'm trying to think of like, I guess like if I was gonna say, okay, how do I really track if a show has really strong delivery? I think of like, do I walk away from the show and remember the voices in my head afterwards as being uniquely identified and emotive, which increases the categories of believable, elevating, and enriching. And right now, I can say, looking at the characters on a screen, I can hear their unique individual voices in my head for this show. But if I was to pull up ReZero, or I was to pull up some other show that I love like crazy, I don't think I'd be able to hear those voices in my head as strongly. Like, I can kind of hear the voices for
maybe
ReZero.
they're like signature lines, you know, they're very
maybe they're
memes
maybe
they do.
But like every one of these characters,
Never fear, All Might is here.
I am here.
I am here. Yes,
Young
exactly.
Midoriya.
Yeah. So, like these characters, the voice actors who did this, they really elevated and enriched the experience. Definitely. Skylar, what were you going to say?
So one thing I've kind of realized with when we were reviewing Rascal is think about if you were to read those lines, because all of us has this internal voice, or at least I do, of how these characters sound in my head when I'm reading them. And then when I hear the voice actor deliver, it's like, okay, does that voice actor sound like the character that I have in my head, or do they execute on what that character sounds like well?
Interesting.
Because
are they better than I pictured it?
Or are they better? Because in Rascal, that was actually why I bumped the delivery, because Sakata, like the way that he just kind of had like that monotone voice, but it was kind of low, but he still was dynamic. It actually elevated his character compared to me just reading.
That's a really cool take on that.
I have another one.
Really cool take.
We ain't done yet, crew. We're revving up this engine. We're going in. This show also was incredible in its edit. In specifically its edit, it time and again wowed me with what it was portraying on scene, while like doing an exposition or how it cut things together. And I'm going to use my favorite episode of this anime for an example, episode number 7. That's when they're about to depart the mainland. They're going to get on the boat and they're going to start going to Antarctica. So I'm going to just read this because I just wrote this out earlier. Episode 7 had this nice moment. The kind adult I wrote out, Kane Mayakawa, addresses the fears of the kids, which were, is this ship, are we really going to be able to sail with less crew and less food than we need? She gives a speech that boils down to, the crew is going to Antarctica no matter what, so don't worry. We made all the preparations and worked to get this ship underway, so there's really not much that can stop us. And while she's talking, there's a montage of the other characters of the boat that gives a lot of foreshadowing to the mood of the ship, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I remember that moment in my head. It showed them stacking the boxes. It showed them by the snow cats. It showed them, like, I remember that moment in my head.
Yeah, exactly. They're using the time they're talking to tell more story. And it's not just that episode. That is my favorite episode for a lot of like inspirational speech stuff and a lot of like motivation. And like they accomplished their midlife crisis thing. They're going to actually fulfill the dream. That my heart. It's so good. And that exemplary edit choice there is shown through many parts of the show. I noted it there, and then I was watching from then on. I could see they kept doing that over and over again. As they kept telling interesting things about the signs on the wall, or what's in the hallway, or the landscape, or something that's relevant to what's they're talking about while they're talking about it, instead of just leaving it as a static visual thing of the characters talking.
Yeah. If I was going to pinpoint a weak part of it, like if I was going to pinpoint anything that would hold it back, I would actually say Yuzuki's voice actor / the presentation of her character was not the strongest. Nothing against Sayori, who did the voice acting for it. It's just, I don't think her character was on the same level as the other characters. And same thing with Megumi, who, she wasn't a main character, but Megumi was not, she had the very monotone delivery.
Yeah.
But it wasn't monotone in a way that was as believable. But she had her very emotive moment as well in the episode, the betrayal episode.
I don't know. I connected with how that character was portrayed because she was trying to like balance against the wild nature of her good friend Mari.
Definitely. And I think it was good. I just don't think it was exceptional like the other characters, but it wasn't meant to be exceptional. So I'm just saying, if I was
Okay, I see.
trying to find things to hold it back, those are the things I would come up with. And Jean, I don't think that her character was necessarily as emotive as I would have hoped either. I think she was kind of a weaker point in this area. Like, even when like she was showing emotion, I kind of wished I heard a little bit more emotion out of her. But the four main characters, Mari, Shirase, Hinata, and Yuzuki, Yuzuki being the weakest, I think were just, yeah, they were exceptional. But what are you thinking for rating, Braydn? What are you proposing?
The delivery, so exceptional being delivery is always believable, genuine, understandable, and elevating and enriching. And then good after being the set down to often, all that stuff. Jeez. I want to be reserved. Like, maybe I'm just exhausted from being so elated about this anime for like an hour or whatever we've recorded this podcast for. But I want to be reserved about this score, and I can't think of a good reason to do it.
I am in a similar boat, because it's like, if I ever want to detract from something, again, as a personal rule, I always have to have a positive critique on something they could have done to improve it. And I'm blanking on what they could have done better, or what they could have swapped out something for something else with.
Yeah, so I will lock in a 5 for me. I mean, you guys gotta understand, you viewers, listeners out there, that we talk about these scores, these technical scores, after the fact. And while we do lock them in as to what we did on the podcast, there's a lot of things that we might review in like maybe a way future that might like polarize these things, especially with things that we're evaluating, like voice acting and the like, which I don't know how much any of us have done voice acting and can give that critique review. Like, yeah, a little bit. But maybe as we gain more experience, we can give out maybe more harsh critique. But in this point of our life, at this point of this podcast, a 5 is where I'm locking in. Brett, do you have any comment for that?
I'm happy to go to a 5. I would personally go to a 4.5, mostly because, again, if I'm thinking, is it always elevating? I think that there's enough of Yuzuki, Jin, and Megami on screen delivering lines that I don't think quite were on the exceptional level, but I'm not going to hold us back and say we have to not give it a 5. I'm just thinking that it was almost always on another level. But 4.5 or 5, I'm happy to go either way.
I would... yeah, go ahead, Skylar.
If the art's a 4.5, then the delivery can be a 4.5.
Interesting.
The negotiation. I
got some more words.
If you give art a 5, I'll give delivery a 5.
Yeah, we'll trade it. Yeah. No, I want to say like this one, like, because like I noted that there was some like little blips that maybe it was like a 4.9 or something for characters when we were just talking about that. Or like a 4.95 or something for characters. You know what I mean? Like, just extremely nitpicky stuff, but it's not enough to keep it from a 5 score. In the ones in this one, I see exactly what you're saying, Brett. And for those characters, I wasn't taken out of experience because of a lot of other characters that stepped up, not just the main characters, but I'm telling you, a lot of the auxiliary stuff that also portrayed a good voice acting that really drove me into it. Yeah, that helped me brush over these ones. Though I will note that if I'm like just giving a tempo feel about this 5, it probably is more towards a 4.8. 4.85 or something. A more. I would give you more about your arguments for this one than I gave myself for my own arguments against characters. Though I still want to toss towards a 5 on this one.
Yeah, I'm willing. Like I say, totally willing to go to a 5. Jean actually did particularly bother me with her voice acting, like the whole show. But again, that was more of a personal thing of just like wishing more from her character, not necessarily that I think the quality of the voice acting was low. So yeah, I'm happy to do a 5.
Okay. Happy to lock that in.
Okay. So there it is. The first show that was so close to perfect. It was so close.
If not for that Braydn character, we would have had it too.
I was the tiebreaker.
That's true. That's true.
So that means that we have 4.5555 for a final technical score of 9.75.
Good goal. That's insane. Crew, that's insane. I didn't even I knew this was going to score high. I just didn't really consider that this was going to be our we topped last week. Last week was our highest ever technically rated show. We got all hyped about that. And now we just blew that one out of the water by 0.75 points. Almost to absolute perfection.
Hey, my one sentence. Surprisingly.
Surprisingly. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, it's going to take a literally perfect technical show to really come close to this. And for those curious, what did the rest of the viewers, like what did other audience members rate this? On My Anime List, 8.5 out of 10. IMDb, 8.3 out of 10. 94% on Google users, and on Crunchyroll, 4.9.
So actually, I want to say that's lower than Steins Gate. Those numbers across the board are lower than the one we ranked at a 9 technically last week.
Except for Crunchyroll. My Anime List, Steins Gate 9.1. But again, these aren't technical scores. These are enjoyment scores.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting that the scores of enjoyment are lower in this one. I don't know. There was definitely, because we talked about last week how that one had like a game following. Like, it was a video game before it became the movie. So maybe it had more of like, oh, you say true to that? Yeah, we're going to rate it high. Well, this is like, as far as I know, it's a completely one-off. It probably had its own writing ahead of time, but then it told that it's an anime.
Yeah, so there is a manga.
It's more niche, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why Steins Gate probably has a higher rating is it is a more nuanced show with lots of intensity and layers, and what you get into in that show is so surprising and shocking that it takes you on this entire ride, whereas with A Place Further in the Universe, it's actually not going to be the pace that most people would want to watch. It is kind of a slice of life, emotional, feel-good show. And actually, most of the people I know who are into anime would kind of take this one and be like, it's not really my speed. So,
this is just, listeners, this is just a gem of our hearts that we just really enjoyed and wanted to share with you guys. It did so good.
We think you should totally watch it. We also think that you should watch these shows. Skylar, do you want to kick us off with a recommendation? If someone liked Place Further Than the Universe, what else should they watch?
So I've actually got a few, and Braydn actually mentioned one of these earlier. Astra, Lost in Space.
I was going to recommend that as well.
So that's one recommendation.
Well, talk about why a little bit. Like,
why? Okay.
What's the correlation?
The correlation is essentially you have a group of high school students that run into a situation where they now are required to travel, and there's a lot of this travel problem-solving mystery thing that kind of happens along their journey, and I'm being a bit cryptic on purpose so that you can experience it to its fullest.
Like, you guys came for spoilers about A Place Further Than the Universe, not for these other shows.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
What other? And the art is also really pretty, very vibrant, similar kind of vibe there.
Yeah, the way the character relationships progress, all of that.
Yeah. What else?
Another one is a slice of life anime called Laid Back Camp.
Saw that coming.
Laid Back Camp.
Yeah, so this is actually one that I really enjoyed. It's very similar in that it is also an all-girl cast. And it's essentially them just going out and camping, enjoying the outdoors.
Sweet. Okay. Any others?
Circle back on that one. I'll think about it.
All right, Braydn, what do you got?
I don't know if I have anything.
Okay, well, you think,
and
I'll give a couple.
That might be especially strange for me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm leading on to a very prolonged thought here. is that might be very strange for me, given the amount of ice in this show. I don't have anything to talk about here.
Oh no!
But really, this I don't watch a lot of the slice of life stuff. So the only show I've seen anywhere close to that is is it Live Love or Love Live or something like that? This is high schooler. It's a pop star anime where it's really big. It's like it's huge, humongous. It's crazy about how big it gets. But it kind of has that same tempo of needing to nurse a small thing into a larger thing. I never finished the first season. I was watching with a friend and we just kind of stopped watching after a while. We did a couple episodes a week and it's one of the things I just fell off. I didn't watch it by myself. But yeah, Love Live.
It is in the idol genre.
Yeah.
I think you got something by your mic, Braydn.
Something?
Something's rustling on your mic.
It's probably me on my coat, on my gloves, on my beard, right next to the microphone.
Yeah. All right, I'll give a couple recommendations. I'm going to start by recommending Toradora. Toradora is a high school romance, kind of slice of lifey, but the relationships are great. The characters are fun. It's a romance instead of an adventure, so a little bit different, but really, really good story, good characters. Again, that one's really, really good. Another one I'm going to recommend is also a romance and a drama, and it's more intense than either of these, but you really get taken on this journey, and it is Your Lie in April. If you specifically, if you are a musician or you are very passionate about music or you ever competed in music competitions, Your Lie in April is incredible. Get ready for all the feels. The feels are strong with Your Lie in April, and they're strong with
danger warning. Your feels are going to get attacked here.
With a place further than the universe.
Yankee.
There are very many feels, but in a different way. The last one I'm going to recommend is going to be K-On! So, little group of girls get together, start a rock band. Just another kind of cute girls doing cute things, friends kind of show. So those are my three recommendations. K-On!, Your Lie in April if you want to feel real deep, and Toradora if you want some romance, character, relationship. All right, Skylar, anything else?
Nope. Just that's another idol genre one, and I'm surprised at how many shows there are in the idol genre.
I know, right? There's a lot. Man, of genres I've not touched, it's the idol genre. Jeez, I just peeked through the door a little bit, creeped in, with the Love Life, oh wait, there's a lot. Okay. I'm not ready for that yet. I'm going to step back. I'm going back to my isekais. Thank you very much.
Skylar, I'm surprised you didn't. I'm surprised that you did not recommend the chef one, the cooking one.
Oh, Restaurant to Another World?
Yeah.
That one's more purely slice of life. It's just a laid-back, relaxed one. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of slice of life ones that I could recommend. And if we do a true slice of life, I will recommend those. Mm-hmm. But A Place Further Than the Universe has a lot more story and character drive going on beyond just slice of life. Yeah. It's just that laid-back camp is more in line with The Place Further Than the Universe. That's why I recommended that one.
Okay, cool. I'm going to throw one more bonus one out there. I just thought of it. Quick bonus one. It's called Kino's Journey, The Beautiful World. It is an adventure that this young person goes on with their talking motorcycle. Sounds a bit crazy. Is it a fantasy? Is it a comedy? No, it is a straight drama. Episodic drama, little A plot, so not necessarily the same thing as Further Than the Universe, but it's got very unique and interesting adventures in different cultures every episode. I didn't personally enjoy it, but you might like it if you want to go for something that's more philosophical but still gets you going into these cool places. And It's very detailed, interesting. Yeah, Kino's Journey.
Every week, you guys bring out these wild anime that I've never heard of. I'm like, guys, I'm already watching too much anime as it is, man. I can't keep up with this stuff. You gotta. We do this every week, and now I'm like, I have this list that just keeps growing past my whole life. Like, I already have a video game list that's not long, and TV show list, and movie list, and book list, and now my anime list is growing. It's just,
if your anime watch list isn't longer than you could do in a lifetime, do you really like anime?
yeah, that's a good point.
Facts, though. Facts.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this one up. This has been really, really awesome. A highly rated show, the highest rated show if you take both our collective entertainment and technical scores, put them together on average. This is the cream of the crop so far out of 11 episodes. Tune in next week to find out if we can top this episode, this show.
If it could be stolen, maybe.
It might be stolen. It just might be swindled by the Netflix Great Pretender.
Oh, Great Pretender. Oh my goodness. Oh, good. Fun times ahead, because I'm going to try to rewatch it. Of course I am. And it's a fun one, crew. Ooh, here it comes.
Put on your ski masks and your eyeliner
and gain some confidence.
Put on your French accent and get ready for Great Pretender next week. But until then, thank you so much for listening. We hope you all have a wonderful time. Check us out, 310anime.com. And until then, Johnny.
Good night.
See you later.
私は南極に着いた。